All right, 13.3 is called Truth in Lending, and it actually comes from an act of Congress back in 1968. It's called the Truth in Lending Act, and it addressed two major issues that people were having problems with at that time. One was addressing the issue of how do we figure out what the actual rate is that somebody's charging for an account, okay? The actual real rate. Because we played with this a little bit, right, in the last section where it said 12%, but it was really 28% after the time was over. That sort of looks funny, doesn't it? So that's one of those issues. And then the second thing was how much of the finance charges that we're entitled to save if we pay something off early. So thinking back about Ann and Andy, if Ann and Andy had that 2-month or 2-year contract that went forward and whatnot, and they had a clause built into their contract that says, but if you pay it off early, you don't have to pay as much interest, well, how much interest would they have saved? Okay, that's the other issue that was addressed by this Truth in Lending Act. So there's actually a very helpful page in your book, and you're going to need your book, not right now necessarily, but when we get to this next week. You're going to need your book on page 707. There's table 5, and when we get to the test, I will have this page printed out for you, so you have your note card, just like always, along with this table. And this table's in blue right here. Okay? So if you're taking a look at the table, the left-hand side of the table has the number of months for a loan. So your months are over here. Okay, the length of the loan. The percents are across the top. We have percentage rates across the top. And then in the middle of the table, we have some values. The values say they are the finance charge per $100 financing amount. Okay? So we'll understand better what this actually ends up being as we work through this, but that's what's in the middle of your table. Okay? We're going to start briefly with one more scenario for Ann and Andy before we quit today. Are you ready? We won't finish them, but remember Ann and Andy. They won, the ones who bought the refrigerator. Shortly after their refrigerator died, their dishwasher died, and against their better judgment, once again, they decided to finance something. It cost $500 with a $100 down payment, but there's no backdating business on this particular one. They're just going to pay interest for 6 months. 18 months. The 18-month interest, okay, right, because we've got this 18-month interest, is 6% add-on interest. Let me make a comment. Add-on interest is the same thing as simple interest, right? We talked about that before when we did this before. It's a simple interest. And we're supposed to find the APR for their loan. Okay, so it sounds like the APR should just be the 6%, but it isn't. Okay, it is not the 6%. And that's what this table 5 is going to help us find. But let's do just a couple of steps before we get there to find out what's going on. How much did they finance? Nope. Somebody said 400. It's 400. Where'd you get 400? This is the dishwasher. The dishwasher cost 500, and they paid 100. It's okay. I know I'm flying through this. We got a $400 finance charge this time. I'm sorry, not finance charge. Amount financed. And then we want to find the finance charge. How do we find the finance charge? Remember, finance charge is going to mean interest on the loan. Your book may not always remind you of that like I just did in those parentheses. How do you find their interest? What formula do you use? The simple interest formula that looked an awful lot like this, right? Yeah. What's their principal? 400. Remember, principal is the amount that you either save or borrow. This one, they're borrowing money. What's the interest rate? 0.06. And what's the time?
18.
Okay, so it is 18 months, but in our formula, we're going to write it in as 1.5 years. It always goes into the formula in years. The only time we've dealt with months is on the credit card statement. You're not going to deal with months on any other problems, okay? Now find out for me, what is 400 times 0.06 times 1.5?
3,600.
I think that's too high.
It's 36.
36.
Oh.
I think you left a decimal off maybe, Tyler. Okay, so they're going to end up paying $436, right? Okay, it doesn't sound quite as drastic as the last problem, partially because the refrigerator, or this is the dishwasher's cost less, partially because they're only paying in 18 months instead of 2.5 years, which is the last one. So there's a couple of reasons, okay? And the other one was that the interest rate was smaller. The last interest rate was 12%, this one's only 6%. Okay? We will pick up with step 3 next time. Have a wonderful weekend, guys.